Transition introduced the Sentinel just about a year ago, and it seemed like everybody gave it glowing reviews. But has it really stood the test of time? Let's talk about it. Hey guys, Josh here again with Daily Mountain Bike Rider, and today I'm going to give you my longer term review on my 2018 Transition Sentinel Carbon. This is a bike that I got a few months back and have really put through the paces. I've taken it to a lot of super technical, steep downhill rides, as well as full day cross-country rides, and I feel like I've ridden the bike enough to give you a fair, honest review of what I think about it. Now, before I jump into that review, I want to say two quick things. First off, do me a favor, if you like my content and have been following the channel for a while, please click that subscribe button below. It just takes a second, doesn't take a lot of work for you, and yet it keeps you up to date on all the videos I post and is a huge confidence booster for me. Second of all, click the link in the description below to head over to my new website, Daily MTB Rider. I've just set this up, and along with that, I have a store so that you can buy some of my merchandise, including my Daily Mountain Bike Rider stickers and t-shirts. Enough about that, let's jump into the review. Before I talk about how the bike rides, let me tell you a little bit about my build of the Transition Sentinel. I have the carbon version, this is the GX build, and I have a size medium. A lot of the stuff on this bike is stock or I've made some minor tweaks to, but the most notable changes I've made are, first off is the fork. It came with a RockShox Lyric, which had nothing wrong with it. I've just ridden the Lyric in the past, and I decided to upgrade it to a 2019 Fox 36. This does have the Grip 2 dampener, reduced offset, and is 160 millimeters of travel. Along with that, I switched out the stock aluminum wheels for carbon CRD or Cascade Racing Design 29-inch wheels. If you want to see a little more details on the full spec of this bike, go ahead and click the video in this link right up here, and you can see everything that is on this bike, and that video is up to date with everything on here. Now, let's jump into my initial impressions of the bike as I got it. My first impressions were that this bike was super stable, it was super fast, and the bike was a ton of fun. My first two rides on this were long days of pedaling and then super long, fast, double black tech descents, and I just felt like I was bringing the bike to its element. I had a huge smile on my face, I was getting great Strava times on trails I'd ridden a ton, and overall I fell in love with the bike. But the longer I rode it, the more I saw the ugly truth of the things that came with this bike. First, with the positives, number one thing that stood out to me is that this bike is stable. The Sentinel has a really long wheelbase, it has a super slack 64-degree head angle, and because of that, this bike feels like it is glued to the ground. Whether I'm going off a big jump and need to have stability while going fast right in that G-out before taking off, or I'm going down a super rooty section, I feel like this bike just feels so planted, it doesn't feel twitchy at all, and it feels comfortable no matter what I'm doing. The second thing that I really feel about this bike is extremely forgiving. With most full suspension bikes, you feel like if you pick a bad line or get into a little bit of trouble, the suspension kind of soaks up your mistakes and kicks you out so you can keep going. The Transition Sentinel takes that to the next degree though. This bike is so forgiving, and no matter what line I take, or even if I'm almost gonna fall off my bike and fall off a cliff, I feel like this bike has like a life-saving button to keep me going. And because of that, it really is confidence inspiring. And the last thing I really like about this bike, and I said it before, but I'll say it again, is this bike is fast. And I mean super fast downhill. I ride with Strava. I'm not super Strava crazy, but I think I got PRs on most of the downhill trails that I ride all the time because this bike is just so dang fast. Now, with all those positives, there are also a handful of negatives. And the first thing that really stood out to me that was negative about the Sentinel is that this bike is not very agile. And what I mean is, while the bike is really good at pointing downhill and staying planted and keeping you stable, when it comes to a more windy or flow trails, it's very hard, I felt like, to continually get the bike pointed where you want it to go because it feels like it just wants to go downhill. The second thing that I really didn't like about the bike is the Sentinel feels extremely heavy. And when I say that, I mean two things. One, the weight of the bike is not light. Mine, with a carbon frame and carbon wheels, weighs just around 33 pounds with pedals. Along with that, and how the bike is designed, the bike feels heavy underneath me. Whether I'm going off smaller jumps or just trying to maneuver the bike in a slower technical section, the bike feels like there's a lot of weight underneath me and isn't as easy or as flickable when it comes to being playful on a trail or having fun or really just trying to adjust the bike to a different line. And the third thing I really didn't like about this bike was its climbing ability. Every time I climb the Sentinel, I put the climb switch into the climb mode, and it seems to get up the hill fine, but compared to any other bike that I've ridden or had, this thing just kind of feels like a boat. It's very long, it's pretty heavy, and when you go on a 2,000 or 3,000 foot vertical day, at the end of it, you're super worn out, you feel like the bike is just hard to get it to the top, and while it's totally worth it for the descents, you are wishing it was a little lighter and a little easier to pedal to get up there. Now, setting the positives and negatives to the side for a second, the question comes to mind, who is this bike for and who is it not for? Starting with who is this bike for, this is for people who absolutely love descending. If you live for the downhills, if you have places where you can shuttle or have lift access for your mountain bike, then I would argue that the Sentinel is totally the bike for you. Or if you find yourself charging in backwoods, super crazy steep technical double black trails, then you're gonna have a hoot with the Sentinel. Along with that, if you are an enduro racer or love to ride enduro courses or enduro races, this bike is, I would argue, probably one of the best enduro bikes because of how fast you're going to feel on the downs. And if you're not timed on your ups, then take it easy and dominate going down. Along with that, who is this bike not for? I would say this bike is not for somebody who is more cross-country oriented or somebody who's looking for one do-it-all bike that is playful and agile, yet having enough suspension to take care of those big hits and sloppy lines that you want. The Sentinel does fine and it holds its own in all of those environments, but you can tell that it's just not designed for it. But the real question is, what do I think about the Sentinel? And for me in my riding, I've come to the conclusion, while I wish I could have the Sentinel as a secondary bike to take on all my big long downhill adventures, I feel like overall, this bike has a little too much travel and a little too much length than what I would go for. And since I am a one full suspension bike kind of guy, I feel like I need a bike that's a little more playful, a little more true do-it-all, and allows me to have just a little more fun in my everyday average trails. But at the end of the day, that's just my review, and I encourage you guys to get out there, go to a local bike shop, find a Sentinel yourself, give it a try, and see if this bike is a good fit for you. Alright guys, that about wraps up my longer term review on the Transition Sentinel. From here on out, I'm going to do a lot of thinking about if this is the bike for me, or think about if there's some other bikes that might suit my needs a little better. But until then, you know what time it is. Don't spend too much time watching a guy in a beautiful puffy vest talk about a Transition Sentinel. But get out there and ride your bike. Make sure you do it every day.